Certainly, happy to provide the detail. Essentially, the story I'm wanting to paint is that there's a limited projected amount of employment in terms of retail and offices. If we continue to allow dispersal of that, then it dilutes what we can achieve in the centres. And so hence the approach we're proposing in the industrial chapter is to restrict retail and office in those areas to avoid it continuing to disperse through industrial areas like it has in the last decade.
You limit retail and office in an industrial area, because obviously if people are working there, they need to be able to go and get coffee, food, all those sorts of things, so they don't have to drive to get all those sorts of things?
We're providing for ancillary retail and office associated with an industrial business and have caps of 250 square metres or 25% of the total floor space on the site, whichever is the lesser. In addition to that, we're also providing for food and beverage outlets for the cafe, like Cafe Kudos on Birmingham Drive. Aside from that, in our general industrial zone, we're also providing for what's already exists in the way of large format retailing. So you've got car sales yards along Morehouse Ave. You've got the likes of Bunnings that was in an industrial zone until that got changed. And so it's allowing for what we call trade suppliers and yard-based retail, which is another group of what we call retail activity.
So what does that effectively exclude that would want to go into an industrial area?
The Manufacturers Association who want to co-locate with Tate Electronics.
Well,
because they're not an ancillary.
To Tate Electronics?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's their largest member, but, you know, apparently it's not ancillary.
So what, can I just clarify?
That in relation to the Tate campus, what would it preclude from going there that is planned to go there?
Anything that's not Tate and anything that's not, you know, like, they could have a cafe in there, I think.
Well, we've reviewed the rules for the Tate campus and the other industrial park zones. The latest draft allows for 5% of the total floor space on a site to be used for offices, which has to be in association with a high technology industrial activity. But open to the difficulty of the words in association with is it does lead to different interpretations of what's in association with. It's trying to be more flexible than ancillary, because in association with is, in my mind, not necessarily the same as being incidental to or secondary to an industrial activity. But specifically on Tate, I'm happy to discuss that now.
Well, great if we could, because I think the concept's awesome and would love to set. But for example, Tate is behind D School, the design school thinking. Obviously, that sort of whole educational gambit is where Tate is very, very much aligned. I'd love to see them develop what they want to develop. I think if we have great industries like Tate and Trimble's and all those guys, we actually want to support them to the hilt rather than knock any creativity that they might have where they get away from sort of looking like an industrial complex and make it more a place where you would want to spend time. I like the concept of what...
Yanni?
Get a sense too, like some of the trade-offs I don't quite understand. So around the Addington Raceway, where they've just had a
Sorry, can we just go back to the Tate one? Because Addington, can we just learn what would be actually blocked from Tate's or some of those other quite out there sort of industries from doing what they want to do in their campus style, that we would be effectively blocking?
Could they have a training school there, or a branch of the university, or you know, an educational facility?
If I could turn to the rules for Tate, which are on page... if I turn to page 112, 112. Right, the rules for the Tate campus actually start on page 111, but the reason for taking you to page 112, and for that matter 113, is it's the list of what's permitted in the Tate campus. Tate's campus is proposed to be a zoned industrial park zone, which and the rules for offices in that zone are intended to be more permissive than other industrial zones, such as the heavy industrial zone, where we want to avoid large office development because it's more likely to have a reverse sensitivity effect. But in terms of Tate, Tate on page 112.
Reverse sensitivity effects, for instance, if you have a heavy industrial zone, there's often noxious odour or other noxious activities that occur in those kinds of zones rather than an activity.
So a heavy industrial
Industrial
zone, companies want to locate there because it's got separation from more sensitive uses.
Yeah, I understand that, but I don't understand it in the high-tech zone.
No, well, that's what we're talking about now.
Sorry, I'm just saying that the industrial park zone, which is a high-tech zone, for want of a better term, we're distinguishing from the other industrial zones. In terms of the Tate campus, the page 112, P5 does provide for trade and industry training facilities without a restriction on size, so they could have educational facilities there.
How big?
There's no limit.
No limit on that?
In terms of offices, P9, as currently worded, allows office activity directly associated with a high technology industrial activity, and there's a standard that it's to be limited to 5% of the total floor space on the site. So taking Tate's overall cap of 50,000 square metres, it would allow for 2,500 square metres of office floor space on their campus. Now, there's an issue, in my mind at least, of where office activity directly associated with high technology industrial activity. What's directly associated with could be interpreted differently, and one may view it as not including the Manufacturers and Exporters Association. And so from the previous feedback you've given, I understand you want to be able to provide for the likes of Manufacturers and Exporters Association, but the difficulty is where we draw that line. We've attempted to by putting the words directly associated with a high technology industrial activity, but that does open up, because this is subject to legal scrutiny, that there's going to be those that come forward with proposals and argue that it's directly associated with, when council staff and even council may argue that it's not. So.
But then then anything that is considered not to be becomes a discretionary activity, which is on page 115, and the assessment criteria indicated there what it would be assessed against.
Yeah. So if it's an office activity that exceeds the 5%, for instance, it's subject to a discretionary activity status. But if it's a standalone office that's got no association with a high technology industrial activity, then it becomes non-compliant.
And given that there are some key industries in Christchurch which are employing a lot of people and driving a lot of exports from the city and are doing quite interesting and exciting things, how will Tate's, just let's be very specific about this, how will they feel about these rules? Do we know?
We've had a submission from them seeking the provisions that were developed through the plan change, which referred to an office associated with a high technology industrial activity.
But how will they feel about these?
In respect to this provision, from memory, their submission seeks that this is worded exactly as the current plan change is, which is.
And do they believe that that's wide enough to cover the New Zealand Manufacturers and Exporters Association?
That's their interpretation, but.
Yeah, but okay, so that's their interpretation. I know that you can't say that that you would interpret it the same way, but I want to know whether you would intend something like that to be included within it. I mean, is it intended to be covered by it? Is it intended to be allowed?
No.
No.
Generally speaking, what we're trying to avoid here is having, for instance, headquarter offices in industrial parks. But if perhaps that type of office can meet these standards and is associated with the high technology industrial activity, then that's okay. We are trying to keep And this is to be consistent with the RPS and the Land Use Recovery Plan. We are trying to keep industrial areas for industrial activity.
But this isn't like industrial as in blowing dirty smoke out of a chimney or having smell and reverse effect, all of those things.
I understand that, but it is industrial land.
Yes, I know, but it's high tech. I mean, we've changed. You know, I feel like our district plan is still, you know, in Dickens' day, you know, looking at what industry is compared to today. I mean, it's not like an industry.
Sorry, what I just said was that if it's an office that meets those standards and is associated with a high-tech industry, yes, it can go there as a permitted activity.
Yes, I know, but what it sounds like is that it sounds like Tate has agreed with the proposed wording in their belief that it allows the New Zealand manufacturers and exporters to build their building there, and yet the council that is writing the rules doesn't believe it extends to cover the manufacturers and association. So it sort of doesn't feel right. Yep.
Let's play devil's advocate on if we just look at it from a different lens for a second. I totally hear what you're saying, and I agree with what you're saying. On the other side of the coin is if you get an aberration where it goes in a way that you don't really want it to go. That's what these rules are intended for, to be quite specific. B4T is for technology, B4 and the other land designations are specifically designed so you don't get aberrations that go against what we actually want to see as an outcome. You know, I have some concerns around loosening those rules to a degree where anything could start being advocated for because we've set a precedent in another area.
Yeah, but it's high tech. High tech's different from industrial activity, and it seems to me that what I'm worried about is that this wording has been agreed by Tate's on the basis that they believe it will achieve their objective, whereas we've very clearly heard that it won't. And that to me is the kind of that's unfortunate in terms of what we're trying to get here.
We've got a situation here where we've got a really good industry that we actually almost want to showcase. They exactly want to do the same thing with their campus development. They're wanting to bring their D school into the centre of town. They've got a really close affiliation, probably the closest of any industry, with Canterbury University. And Canterbury University wants to do internship and all sorts of things. What we want is a completely different style of thinking, and actually it wants to be one of those places where people come in from China or wherever they're selling their goods to, and they see something awesome. So it kind of is a mix of industry, high-tech, office space, green space, all sorts of lovely things. And they may just go there on their journey to Christchurch, and that's what they're going to see of Christchurch. So we need a sort of definition of industry for these types of industries, and it's going to be exactly the same with the whole of the IT industry because it looks very much like your front room. It doesn't look like gelati, you know, it doesn't look like you're manufacturing tyres or cars or the noise and you know, living here.
I mean, the reason manufacturers and exporters want to locate there is because of the showcase. That's why they want to be there. They want to be able to showcase what Tate's does, and it's the way that it does what it does. I mean, it's changed its orientation from really the manufacturer of things to the end-to-end lifelong service provision. You know, it's not. Yeah, the solutions are very specific. I mean, you know, that they tell an amazing story about being in places that have skipped the whole analogue generation. They've gone straight to digital and radio technology, providing access to coffee bean farmers, you know, to the price of coffee beans around the world, which puts them in a marketplace that they wouldn't otherwise be in.
So we need to start thinking about industrial, like Trimble's new building, for example, with all the building information stuff in the walls, built actually by City Care, is stunning sort of things.
Well,
it's
it
exactly
actually
what
was
we want
built
to
by Mainzeal, who went bust, and bought by City Care.
And completed by City Care, and fantastic, and awesome. And that's the sort of thing we need to showcase. So these things, although they're industrial, need to be able to have around them all the sorts of things you see in those parks in China where you go and see electric cars, and then, you know, there's this amazing showroom, and then there's coffee, and then there's whatever.
My understanding though is that Tate got a new plan change back when they built out there, and they changed the land from B4 to B4T, is that correct?
Rural 2 to B4T.
So the T didn't exist before Tate's actually designated that designation.
Oh, there's a B4T zone that exists in the current city plan in William Pickering Drive.
So if we want to actually drive an outcome that actually gets the outcome you're looking for, do we have to find a new designation?
There are a couple of options that you can
B4TA.
consider, but I also need to advise you of the implications.
Yeah.
One thing that you could have, for instance, is take out the office space directly associated with high technology industrial activity and just don't have it associated with high technology. Because all of Tate's own this particular land, then
Yeah.
it's their decision as to how much they want to give to office space or the types of offices. And if they don't save enough land for their own activities, then that's their business. But you could still have a cap. You could still keep the cap. The other difficulty that I would bring to your attention is then there will be pressure on us to change all of the other industrial park areas to be the same.
Why?
And so you get to the same.
Why?
Well, because they might want to have certain offices that are above the cap or that are not associated to their
But
businesses
that
that want to
pressure's
come in
never
here.
come from anywhere else. This is the one example.
At the moment.
I understand why you're trying to write a generic rule, but the thing is that this is a specific example which makes sense on every level, except that you want to relocate office space to the CBD and to other commercial centres that are already zoned for that purpose. So that's the only reason for this. None of the reverse sensitivities, none of those things actually matter. It is only about preferring the location. Well, I don't think that's a strong enough reason to put up against what I think Tate has put forward as a reasonable position on having their industry body based on the same campus, so it can showcase Tate as part of its showcasing of the high-tech industry, which is a big part of manufacturing and export. And it's got so much positive for its connection with Christchurch, particularly in our post-disaster environment. The whole concept of moving to becoming a sensing city, all of the work that we want to do in order to get the city really on the map for more than being a disaster, but actually being a place where creativity and innovation are happening. And these showcase environments, it's not going to happen in the CBD. Tate is located where it's located. Why on earth would we force its organisation to go into the CBD of Auckland, which is where it will go, rather than to have a concept plan that enables a sensible co-location? Paul?
I'd just like to say that I would hate to think that actually we allow commercial office space to start locating in industrial areas. That would be a real mistake in my mind, because what we'll end up having is all of a sudden you get a certain amount of commercial activity in an industrial area. The people that work there start complaining about the smells and the noise, and then it starts becoming a problem. We've seen it where we've actually had activities like Living Earth, and now it's actually the smells spilling out into the residents.
Totally agree.
So I would want to see it confined to the T.
Yep.
Not
it's
to the
the high tech,
so
the high tech only.
Yep,
So can I ask, are you still happy with a cap on the amount of space? So you want no cap and you want no relationship to the high technology industrial activity?
I mean, I have no idea around the cap. I haven't got a sense of...
The cap for offices, let's assume the restriction of it being associated with the high-tech industrial activities removed. There's no the 250 cap doesn't apply in this instance. It's a total. There's a limit of 5% of the total floor space on the site. So 50,000 square metres of development could occur on the Tate campus. That's a restriction based on traffic effects. 5% of that would be 2,500 square metres.
I just can't see the difference in a high-tech area between an office and a workplace, like between because I was just sitting at computers, like,
Yeah.
the CAD design section looks like an office to me.
Okay.
So, I could call it whatever I want.
So certainly open to discussing the cap. My concern with not having any cap at all is that it will potentially
It
Well,
might get struck down for the sake that it doesn't meet the requirements of the LERP. Is that what?
No. I was going to say that it becomes more lucrative. From Tate's perspective, arguably, it's that the land's worth a lot more if it can be developed entirely for offices, and the whole thing becomes an office park.
Okay. So can you go bolder with your cap?
So we can look at it and come back to you about.
Yep.
They've got an outline development plan. Could we not just have a designated space in there, like as an outline development? Just add it to the outline development plan on this particular case, given the special circumstance. Like, how hard is that? Is that just a consent? Can we do it part of the plan change? Because I think we're sort of having an argument, which I kind of think, like, you know, at the end of the day, go back to the principles of the city plan. If it's non-complying, you apply for a consent. If it's non-complying, it's generally non-notified and it's generally granted. And it might have some conditions around it to mitigate a few things. So we're not saying that they can't have this space, but is there another way that we can actually do it that means that we don't have this long, protracted thing that undermines all the other areas? Because I have concerns that what happens is people use the easiest possible planning mechanism to get offices put into these areas, and then over time, all they do is say, well, we've already built it, and like the Ferrymead Apartments, it got consent for an office development in an industrial area that then turned into a residential apartment, which has now come down.